Okay, before we move on to the evidence in part two, I just wanted to add a few things to part one.
Go on.
So, firstly, we're not trying to do a critique of Kennedy. We just want to shed some light on his murder, although that's not to say the direction he was taking politically didn't have a bearing on his murder. And for the time frame, so in part one, we mentioned the time frames, but it would be remiss to overlook the train crossing the overpass at the precise moment the limousine was coming down Elm Street. So I want to come back to that point at a later stage. Similarly to Carlos Marcello walking out of court free. I think it might actually have been in Florida, not in New Orleans. But he walked free out of court 30 minutes before the assassination. Well, actually, back in Washington in the Senate, Lyndon Johnson's sidekick, Bobby Baker, he was being quizzed in the Senate about his finances. And actually, Life were going to do an expose in the following days,
Right.
with Lyndon Johnson implicated, and it suggested that not only was his political career facing ruin, he could actually be spending time behind bars. Okay, so I don't know whether you, Jace, wanted to add anything to, if you wanted to add anything to part one.
No, only just to sort of, back up what you said, that, we're not about trying to cast any kind of aspersions on Kennedy or the Kennedy family. I mean, everything that we say is already out there as a matter of public record or notice anyway. Yeah. And it's not about us making judgments or decisions or anything like that, but it's just about exploring the whole sort of events of that day, really, based on what we know now about modern techniques and even techniques that were actually around at that time that weren't used.
Okay, so okay, let's move on to the evidence. So I think there are different kinds of evidence. I'm not a policeman, I'm not a lawyer, but it would seem to me that the body would be a good place to start off with. So as we discussed in part one, in our opinion, the body should have stayed in Dallas, but actually it didn't. And I wonder, because it was removed, if Oswald had ever faced trial, if he'd lived and gone to a courtroom, whether the body would, the evidence, the so-called evidence, would have been admissible in court, because the chain of command was broken. It should have stayed in Dallas, and actually it was illegally removed. So I just wonder how that would have stood up in court. So, what evidence do we have? I mean, the evidence, I guess, is the photographic evidence, the testimony of the official evidence, is the autopsy that apparently took took place in Bethesda. But as we just said, actually, we should be referring to autopsy records from Dallas, but there aren't any because there was never an autopsy in Dallas. So then you've got to think, well, we can look at the photographic evidence from Dealey Plaza, and then we've got no photographic evidence from Parkland. So then you've got to go on the testimony. And then, as I said, the evidence from Bethesda. So, you know, what do we have? Jace, what body evidence do we have? I don't think there is a lot of body evidence to discuss.
Well, there isn't.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the point, isn't it? All we have physical evidence relating to the body are those dodgy. Well, I say dodgy. Those limited, shall we say, photographs post mortem. But you know, even the other photographs that were allegedly taken weren't ever submitted to the Warren Commission. Yeah. What was submitted to the Warren Commission was sketches. Yeah. Sketches. I mean, what's that all about?
Yeah, I want to come back.
And again, there was no brain. There was no brain either because the brain went missing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think also, did some people want to exhume his body, and maybe the Kennedy family didn't want that to happen? So yeah, so I don't think we'll come back to the photographic evidence later, but as regards the body, there was no official autopsy in Dallas. So I think what happened in Bethesda was illegal. So I don't think we have a lot of body evidence, which I think was the intention. So we can come back to the body. We can come back to the body indirectly through witness testimony and photographic evidence, but we'll leave that for the moment. So I don't know, unless you wanted to add anything else regards the body.
There is nothing to add, is there? Because, you know,
the only thing I can say about
even if you can regard the body, if we can regard the body as evidence, then that evidence was tampered with.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
End of. So then, therefore, even if what you said about Oswald, if that had gone to court, it couldn't have been admissible because it had been tampered with, inadmissible evidence.
Yeah. And I wonder how would that have been enough for him to have gotten off if he had ever gone to a court? Just on that point alone.
Yeah. I mean, well, just on that point alone, I mean, again, digressing slightly, absolutely no way that anybody that was arrested for that murder, Harvey Oswald or anybody, they were never ever going to be brought to trial. Ever. It was never going to happen.
No. The other thing I just going to add, although it's not really body evidence, but the thing about that was whether they were or not is another thing, but Kellerman and Greer, the two guys in the front seat of the limousine, they are suspects. As I said, regardless of whether they did it or not, but they are suspects. And
everybody's a suspect.
Yeah, but they are bigger suspects than certain other people that were in Dealey Plaza. And we have suspects. I think they were alone with the body for a certain period of time at Parkland Hospital. They were in the operating. They were in the trauma room, I believe. I think they were also alone with the body for a while as well. And I think I'm right in saying, I could be wrong, I think they were also with the body at Bethesda. I'm not sure about that one. Were they with the body in Bethesda? So
yeah, at some point. Yeah.
So they should not. That people like that should be nowhere near the autopsy. I mean, it's just
I
not
don't
correct.
disagree.
So that's just a final point for the time being on the body. Okay, so let's quickly move on. I mean, how quick was that? Okay, and then so the next piece of evidence on the body, you're going to have clothing. So
Forensic evidence.
so I don't know a lot about the clothing, so but I think I'm right in saying that Connolly's clothing, rather than being bagged and tagged to be used in a trial as evidence, his clothing was taken to the dry cleaners and cleaned, which is sounds very similar to what happened to the limousine. Do you know anything else? And I think also in the
Surely.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
It wouldn't have just been dry cleaned. It would have had to have been repaired because it's the so-called bullet that went through it and hit him in the leg.
Well, anyway, it sounds bizarre. I think also the some people talk about Kennedy's clothes were all crumpled up because he was slouched, and that which was used to justify magic bullet theory as well. I don't know whether you know anything else more about the clothing.
I also because he had back trouble, quite chronic back trouble, and because of the back brace, he was unable to wear a bulletproof vest, which was standard protocol. Not that it would have mattered anyway, although the first shot did hit him in the back, or in the back of the neck. But the headshot would have got him anyway. Bulletproof vests don't stop a headshot. But yes, the clothing. I mean, Jackie, obviously, her pink outfit covered in brain matter, bone fragments, and blood. The minute they got to the hospital, Lyndon Johnson ordered Jackie to change, and she said, "No, I want the world to see what they did to him." And quite telling that she said they. Person, right? I know you say things in the heat of the moment, in the heat of grief and everything else, but it's like that was an actual quote from her. I want the world to see what they did to him.
Do you think she kind of knew instinctively, or do you think she was suggesting that from the events that had happened, she actually had noticed something?
Well, I mean, you say about this is going to be really controversial now. We can expect the hate mail to come flooding in, but I've often considered Jackie to be a suspect. To be honest,
well, I've seen that
in terms of knowing what was going on.
Well, I've seen that argument as well. I don't know much about it. I think her father as well.
She had motive.
Yeah.
She had plenty of motive.
Yeah, personally, I have extreme doubts about that theory myself, but I know some people have argued that. I think her father was of the same ilk, apparently, as JFK, as regards women.
Yeah, but like in any crime, you know, if there is a motive, that motive has to be investigated and discounted.
Absolutely. Yeah, right? Yeah, oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it has to be. I mean, she did have motive.
And it wasn't.
Okay, but you're not saying she fired a shot. You're just saying that the possibility needs to be considered that she might have been involved in the conspiracy. That's what you're saying, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it is difficult to sort of come to those conclusions with those guys. I mean, you talk about the driver and the guy in the front seat in front of Kennedy, and also we've now touched on Lee and Jackie as well. It is difficult to actually comprehend that if you knew that something like that was about to happen, that you'd actually want to be in that car.
Yeah.
Right. Because, you know, stray bullets and all that stuff, right? I certainly wouldn't want to be in the car if I knew that was going to happen.
Well, that's the other thing. I mean, we're going to discuss it later, but apparently Lyndon Johnson had an argument with Kennedy on the morning because Johnson had made the arrangements for the motorcade. And he had a really bad argument with Kennedy because he didn't want Connolly in the car with Kennedy. He wanted Yarborough to be in that car. Yeah, one other thing, sorry, going back to the body, I think we talked about it in part one as well. It's kind of an unusual situation where you have, as you said, it wasn't actually a corpse at the time. It was still officially somebody still alive, but it's kind of like a corpse to be on the run. It's like an escaping corpse. So it's very unusual situation. Okay, so we've briefly looked at the body, briefly looked at the clothes. So then after that, in the body, you have the bullets. So I gotta confess, I don't know a lot about the bullet evidence. So I think you know more about it than I do. So the Warren Commission said there were 3 shots, and one of them was supposedly a magic bullet. There was also a pristine bullet found on the gurney in Parkland Hospital. Is that the magic bullet, or are they 2 different bullets, Jace?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the pristine bullet was the exact type of bullet that came from the rifle that was later displayed by the Dallas Police Department. And when I say displayed, carried aloft, look at what we've got, kind of thing. But to me, again, that rifle is evidence, but that evidence is after the fact, you know, because it wasn't found at the time of the, you know. So it's after the fact. But yeah, the pristine bullet was the exact type of bullet to fit that rifle. And it was pristine in as much it wasn't even chamber marked. And by that, I mean all bullets that fire out of a Marcano rifle get scoring on the casing as they go through the chamber. Nothing. That bullet had not been. But again, those were ballistics, and all that was ignored by the Warren Commission. The magic bullet that famously everybody knows would have taken about 13 different trajectories to reach its final destination embedded in Governor Connolly's leg. Which then, you know, it's like, well, where are the bullets that were in Kennedy's body?
Yeah, so if you got the magic and the pristine, you're saying they're 2 different bullets or they're the same bullet?
No, they were, well, some people say they were the same bullet, but apparently they were two different bullets.
So if they're two different bullets, that, according
So
to
there was
the
a bullet,
warrant,
there was a bullet that appeared on the stretcher, and there was a bullet that appeared on the floor of the limo. The bullet that appeared on the floor of the limo was meant to be the magic, which different twists and turns in and did a left turn in midair and all that stuff.
so that leaves one bullet. So where was
so
the
yeah,
where
I
was,
mean,
where was the one remaining bullet then? In the body, in Kennedy's body, in Connolly's body? Where's the one remaining bullet?
well, it should have been in his brain, should it not? Or at least fragments of it.
So did they ever find the other bullet or not find the other bullet or the fragments? Okay.
They'll say not, no.
So
but the bullet that hit Kennedy in the back and then came out through his throat and then hit the side of the vehicle and then took another left turn and then went into Governor Connolly's leg, into his femur or whatever it was. You know, it's just like unbelievable. Well, it is unbelievable, which is why we're having this conversation.
So both of those bullets match the rifle. Is that right? The Meccano.
Yeah.
And those two bullets, one was found on the floor of the limousine, and the other one was found in the hospital on the gurney. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, and there were three fired casings or spent casings on the floor of the book depository. Because you'd do that, wouldn't you? You'd do that. You would absolutely do that. If you'd gone to all that trouble to assassinate the president of the United States, you'd leave all that shit lying around behind you, and you'd have the most archaic rifle you could get, considering you've got to assume you're the best marksman in the world, right, to carry off that turkey shoot. Never in a million years.
So I think it seems logical to talk about the guns then, because there is film footage of the policeman actually originally finding a Mauser. So actually, you can see it on film. Actually, they initially said they had a Mauser, and the police officers are holding up. I can't remember the guy's name. Weitz, is it? Weitzman. He said it was a Mauser, and he was.
So where did that come from?
He was a gun expert, and he had a shop that sold guns. He knew all about guns. He said it was a Mauser.
So where did that gun come from then?
Oh yeah, it was found on the sixth floor.
Yeah, but it wasn't a Mauser; it was a Marcano rifle.
No, officially there was a Meccano found, but the first gun that was found was a Mauser. They said it was a Mauser. They showed it up. It's on film. They showed they had a Mauser.
So many guns did they find? One or two?
Well, officially they found one, but actually they found the Meccano after they came up with the Meccano after they found the Mauser.
You know why, don't you?
Well, they wanted to tie the Meccano to Oswald, didn't they?
Yeah, because they'd already fitted him up in that photograph.
Yeah.
With a Marcano.
Yeah, but the first gun found was a Mauser. I think.
But what about the guy in the pickup that was seen loading a wrap? What about the guy? What about the guy in the pickup truck that was seen loading a wrapped up rifle?
Yeah.
Pickup truck.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know what that gun was, but So anyway, the gun that they came up with.
That was probably a Mauser.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'm not a gun expert, but I suspect a Mauser would have done the job better than a Meccano. I don't know. Okay, so there are also question marks over the guns that were found. Not only that a Mauser was initially reported, but then, of course, there are question marks over the ability of the Meccano to do the job that they say Oswald did. So again, you know more about this side of things than I do, Jace. Can you fill us in about the capability of the Meccano and the likelihood of it having shot Kennedy 3 times, hit him 3 times? Can you go on about that?
Well, even in 1963, a Meccano rifle was deemed to be an antique rifle, right? And it's got a bolt action. So you got a bolt action. So you'd have to do fire, 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 you know, and sometimes, in fact, those bolt actions on those Meccano's stick or they jam. That Meccano, the first thing is that in order to do the 3 shots in the time scale of the say 3 shots that assassinated the president or were fired in the assassination of the president, that gun would have had to have behaved better than it ever had before or ever would again, right? On the off chance, on that, you know, coincidence of that being the case, right? The actual rifle that was presented as evidence was examined and it was deemed not to be in the best condition. So a Meccano of the not in the condition would have struggled to rattle off those 3 rounds. Not only that, the US Army actually tried to replicate getting those rounds off in that time using at least 26 marksmen, and not one of them could get anywhere close.
I think they were also the best marksmen as well.
And Oswald, from his records, couldn't hit a can of beans on his garden fence, right? So, do you know what I mean? He couldn't hit a can of beans on his garden fence, yet he could hit a moving president's brain, you know.
Apparently, also
Bizarre,
the scope. Apparently, the scope
with a shed loads of
apparently
it was off.
Yeah, the scope wasn't set either. Also, he had a paraffin test, I think, and the paraffin test showed that he hadn't fired a weapon on that day.
Yeah, so I mean, like in modern day forensics, he'd been tested for gunshot residue, GSR. Yeah, any fire you get residue, and you know, whether there was anything like that around 1963, I would imagine there was something, which is obviously why they did the paraffin test, right?
Yeah.
But again, he passed the paraffin. He also passed the lie detector test, which actually goes undocumented in the Warren Commission report.
Okay, so so let's move on then to, I think, the scene. Dealey Plaza is evidence as well. So the location is evidence as well. But as we talked about in part 1, the police failed to secure the area. They didn't seal it off. So, for example, by the grassy knoll, there were footprints, cigarette butts. Couldn't they have bagged the cigarettes? I mean, these days, couldn't you do a DNA test on the cigarette butts? Also, I've seen enough crime dramas to know that they take foot molds for footprints and all that kind of stuff. But by them insisting they already had their suspect and they didn't need to look for anybody else, that absolved them of responsibility for doing anything else.
Yeah.
I think also, you know, they had Henry Wade was he the DA or the assistant DA? I think he was the DA. And in the 1980s, it was discovered that he'd actually been really bent, and a lot of his work from the 1960s, especially, was overturned. So he sent a lot of innocent men to death row. A lot of people had been wrongly convicted. So if you remember there, again, you can see the film footage. He insisted that they, beyond any reasonable doubt, I remember him saying, beyond any reasonable doubt, they had their man. So they didn't even bother. They didn't even bother trying to collect evidence. Oswald was their man. They weren't even going to bother investigating. So there must have been, I mean.
No, that's right, because they'd already got their man.
Yeah. You know, so I mean, you think about it, if they'd sealed off the area, I'm not a crime scene investigator, but there must have been all sorts of things they could have done, you know, like looking for bullets. There were stories of a skull, bits of skull being picked up in the days following that.
Yeah.
As I said, footprints on the knoll, cigarette butts, all that kind of stuff.
I've often wondered how many people are there. I mean, obviously, a lot of people are dying now or have died already, but how many people that were there maybe took photographs that then got them developed that never ever showed one?
Yeah.
And they've just like sat on them, they're in their loft somewhere.
Yeah.
You know, there's evidence out there, I'm sure.
Well, I'm sure there must be witnesses who saw stuff as well and just didn't say anything.
Well, there are witnesses that said stuff that are no just circumstances.
Okay, so we've gone through what we might call primary evidence. Let's move on to the film footage. So we've been discussing this. So of course, the Zapruder film is regarded as the Bible on what happened, although we're not convinced it is what it seems. So Jace, can you run us through the Zapruder film? What does it say?
What does it say?
Yeah, what story does it tell us?
It gives us I want to say evidence, but I don't want to say evidence at the same time, but it gives us evidence of, or it gives us visual evidence, if you like, of what actually happened. But it also gives us more questions than answers, I feel. Because I'm not convinced that we've seen the entirety of that video, and the fact that there are more than one version of the Zapruder film asked me to ask the question, well, why is there more than one version? There should be just one version. And okay, yeah, they might have digitized it, but you can digitize it all you like, but once you start tampering with it, it's then a fake.
Yeah.
You can make it clear, you can make it, you know, digitally enhance it, all that stuff. But once you do that, you haven't got the original, therefore it is a fake. So I think the one that was seized by Life magazine or whatever it was, I don't think we've ever seen it. I really think it was doctored, and I think that it was presented to us in a way that we're not seeing stuff that we should see, that we're seeing exactly what they want us to see. And you know, there are the more you watch it, every time you watch it, you always spot something different. and you always spot something which is, I mean, I've looked at that film, I must have looked at that film 1,000 times, and you pointed out something to me today that I'd never seen before. So, you know, it's like there's always something there, and the reason there's always something there is because there's always something missing, right? There are so many gaps, there are so many chunks, and you know well, you know my thoughts on the sprockets.
Okay, well let's go through it. Let's try and go through that film step by step, and try and explain why we have extreme doubts about it. So, can you give your take? You've probably got more things to talk about than I have. I'll add what I have to say about it after you've had your go. So, can you tell me about why you felt about it?
Okay. Well, my first always rang in my head was the sprockets, which are the squares that you would see on the side of any moving reel of film. For a start, there aren't sprockets on both sides of the image that we see, and I would want to know why. They don't move. They don't move with the film. They don't even shake or vibrate. And each slide on that film would have a different set of sprockets. At one point in the film, you do see a line go right across from one side of the screen to the other, which is either denotes that that's a frame at some point. And again, you know, considering it is supposed to be frame by frame on a 35mm, it just jumps, and it jumps so many times. So the whole thing has just been put together, edited heavily, I would say. I personally think that if you look at the sprockets with an objectional eye, they look to me as though they've been superimposed over the top of the film. If you look down the left-hand side where the sprockets are, you see a vertical movement frame by frame of writing, which indicates like Kodak, whatever, you know, that kind of stuff that you would moves. The sprockets don't, but that moves almost like it's behind the sprockets. But for me, the context of the size isn't right, because the sprockets don't tend to match the print that you see almost in a negative image, right? And as a result of that, I think that the whole image that we see is almost cropped, if you like, to bring the whole thing closer to us, therefore cutting off. If you imagine my hand, if you see my hand now, if you imagine my hand is JFK's car, which should be central to the film,
yeah,
I think it's been cropped to bring it closer to us, and then brings the car down like that.
Yeah.
So you can see half of the car, and therefore everything you see above the car is therefore brought down into view a lot more than what it would be.
Yeah, enlarged. I think the upper.
And I think at various convenient points in the film, things are obstructed. Well, I can only speculate as to what they might be, but they are conveniently obstructed at convenient points in the film.
Well, inconvenient points for us, I would say.
So I just don't think what we've seen is the authentic, untouched original film. You know, why are there not sprockets on both sides, for goodness sake?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, sprockets is not something I've looked at myself, but I think Zapruder said that it was he thought he'd taken a continual film of the motorcade from Houston down to Elm, but it's obviously cut. It's obviously been cut, and I think officially there are four frames are missing? 308, 9, 10, and 11. They're actually not there on the film. And as we were discussing earlier, as I was trying to show you earlier as well, I think if you take a film or something, normally you would focus, the focus of your film would be central. But if you if you look at the limousine coming down Elm, at the top of Elm, it is central, but the closer it gets to the Stemmons highway sign, it almost disappears out of view. So, I mean, if it was Zapruder, it was taking
at the crucial moment.
Yeah, if it was Zapruder shooting that film, and he had a few brandies, or was he focusing not on Kennedy but on something else, or as you just alluded to, actually has the bottom part of or the bottom parts of some of the frames been cropped, and to disguise that fact, the upper parts of those images been enlarged. That's what I think has happened. And if the upper parts of those images have been enlarged, what were they trying? What is that hiding? What was in the bottom parts of those images? So that would be the bottom parts of those images would be, I think they call it the south side of the road. So it would be south knoll side. Is it south? No, it'd be the north side, wouldn't it? The north knoll side of the road.
North side, yeah.
So that would be in the vicinity of the so-called umbrella man, dark complected man, the right hand police cyclist, and the knoll itself. So if that is the case, then what was that hiding? You've also alluded to the sprocket squares, the white squares. So if you're correct, I don't think it would have been all the squares. I think they might have put in a lot of fixed squares, and maybe just to cover up what was behind one of them. So whether that was a shooter or just conspirators, I don't know. So we've also we were looking at in that film, if you look at Babushka Lady, I hadn't noticed it at full speed before, but actually even in full speed, if you fix your eyes on Babushka Lady, just prior to the fatal headshot, or what we think was the fatal headshot, there is an amazing flash. I think it's two flashes of light coming from two different lenses by the looks of it. An amazing like orange light coming from that camera. What is that? It doesn't look like a normal flash. Do you think that's
I don't know.
It's really unusual. And we're also looking at it. Babushka Lady is standing almost directly across from Zapruder, and they are almost identical distances from the kerb as well. And they're right in line there where the shooting's taking place. And
the other thing to note as well is that almost out of view, at the exact almost the fatal shot, almost out of view in the bottom corner of the frame, there is a flash on the windscreen, and then a flash behind the windscreen almost at the same time, which could be, I'm not saying it is, but it could be shattered glass. The Warren Commission discounted that as sunlight reflecting off the windscreen, but then why would there be something behind the windscreen as well? It makes no sense. That makes no sense. So definitely something happening around the windshield area at the exact point that the fatal shot hits.
And if it's
from the front.
Yeah, and if it's coming through the windscreen,
and I don't care what anybody says, that shot is from the front.
Yeah. So, and if it were from the front and people thought there was something from the grassy knoll, then was that just was that a decoy? The other thing, if you considered, I mean, for example, later on, Beverly Oliver came forward to say she was Babushka Lady. There seemed to be an awful lot of people involved in this who knew Jack Ruby. I mean, if I went down to Portsmouth City Centre to see a VIP and something happened there, and then there was a police investigation, and even in a relatively small place like Portsmouth, everybody knew me, the police would think that was suspicious. But have you also considered the possibility that actually some of those witnesses, they weren't what they appear to be, and it was all staged, and they were saying there were shots from the grassy knoll, when in fact maybe there weren't.
Yeah.
And also, so we
and it's also interesting, you know, what you said earlier. What you said earlier about there are a lot of testimonies from people from the grassy knoll. When you look at the grassy knoll, there ain't that many people on it.
That's right. Yeah, because there was that guy called Arnold Rowland, I think it was. He said he was there and he had a camera, but I can't see him. I can't see him there. And he said there were a couple of police officers behind him, and he felt the whiz of a shot. But you know, you look at the Nix film, which I want to discuss now. I mean, I'm not sure where he was, but we just been looking at it as well. So the Orville Nix film, which I think he said he felt had been changed. So I think he'd had his camera taken off him, then he had it returned, and I think he'd seen the film, and then he'd handed it in, or it'd been taken from him, but I think he when he got it back, he said he felt it was a little bit different to the one that he'd handed in, because he'd already seen it. But we just been looking at that Orville Nix film, and similar to the Zapruder film, where we were discussing the flash of light from Babushka Lady's camera. Well, we think it was a camera immediately before the fatal headshot. Similarly, in the Orville Nix film, which was taken on the other side of the limousine from Zapruder, especially if you stop go the film, again, immediately prior to the fatal headshot, there are what Jace thinks look like vapor trails, 3 vapor trails coming from the grassy knoll. And if you line those vapor trails up with the limousine, they go directly to Kennedy's head. I've never heard those discussed before. Did you want to add anything onto that point, or the rest of the Nix film, Jace?
Not much to add, really, other than that those what I called vapor trails. I've never seen those before, because they are so quick. You just don't, you know. But it's only when you freeze frame it you see them. And like any vapor trail, they don't last very long, right? So a bullet vapor trail will only last, you know, literally fractions of a second. But all 3, it's almost like they've been it's almost like 3 guns have been fired at the same time, which would account for only 1 shot being heard if they're all fired at exactly the same time, I guess. But anyway, and you know, who's to say, it might just be trick of the light, whatever, but it's just a massive coincidence that those three vapor trails, when you put a ruler from one corner of the frame to the other corner of the frame, the exact angle on those three shots goes right through the president's head.
Yeah.
Which is just, it's just weird. It's just weird. I've never seen it before. It was almost like a, oh wow, oh my God moment when I saw that.
So yeah, I so on some of those films, it is, if you freeze frame some of those films, it's but I never actually noticed it in at full speed, but then when I freeze framed them, I noticed it, but then when I looked again at full speed, I noticed them. So that's unusual. But there were other movies taken as well. So, for example, there was the Bronson movie, Charles Bronson, but not the movie actor. So, and some people believe actually it's not. It was not an authentic movie, and what's in it is just a decoy. So I think in that image, apparently there was the guy with the epileptic fit. Although when I looked at the film I couldn't see any epileptic in it. And also, I think he took pictures of the sixth floor. And similarly, similar to other images, people have claimed that there were figures in the windows and all that kind of thing. Although I got to confess, as much as I'd like to see some figures, I don't see some of the images that other people have seen. I can say that about the pergola as well. Some people say there are people in the pergola, but I gotta confess, I can't see them myself. So, what are your thoughts on those images that some people say they can see in the pergola, the sixth floor, and all that, Jace?
The thing is, with the quality in '63, it wasn't brilliant anyway. And I think with all the doubt that was fueled by the whole situation and the way that stuff was, fudged and botched and what you want to call it, I think there's a lot of, people will see what they want to see, because they've got a notion in their head or whatever. They'll see what they want to see. But I'm more interested in what I can actually see rather than what I think I can see. Yeah, I mean, there are bits. I mean, that, like I said to you the other day, when I changed an image of the car going on the entourage going under the underpass, and I lightened it up, there's definitely a figure under the underpass, which you wouldn't see in a normal photograph because it's all black, right? But I can't make out whether that figure is male, female, Secret Service, hobo, whatever. I can't make it out, but it's definitely a figure. But I think there's a lot of not just with the JFK thing. There's a lot of instances throughout history where people have said, "Oh, you can see such and such in the trees over there." Well, it's like, yeah, I can make out Fidel Castro in the clouds if I look long enough.
Yeah, I think some people are trying to force it. They want to see it, and sometimes, or some people are just simply making it up.
Yeah.
I think also, moving on from the film, we also have a lot of photographic evidence as well. I think actually even in the films. So some people say that you can see the brake lights on the limousine, for example. I think somebody said as also they could see the brake light on the lead car going under the underpass.
Yeah.
But let's move on to the photographic evidence. In some of the photographs, we have Babushka Lady, so who we've already discussed, and we were talking about this beforehand, where most of the people taking pictures or shooting film, they were curbside because obviously they wanted to get as close to Kennedy as possible. But sticking out a little bit, you have not only Babushka Lady, but also Zapruder, who decided to stand back. I mean, and in Babushka Lady's case, she's actually standing directly behind the Brehms. So, I mean, and she had lots of space, open space around her. She could have picked a spot almost other than where the Brehms were standing. So it seems strange to me that she would not stand curbside. She actually chose to stand a long way back to take pictures of Kennedy. So was that because she had a superior camera, or she wanted to include something else in the picture? What do you think?
I'm not very convinced by Babushka Lady at all. And I don't know why. The only thing that I question about that is that if she had any kind of involvement or motive or whatever, why would she place herself in a position where she's got another person in front of her, whether they're an innocent bystander or whether they're a plant or what? Why would she do that? Because that guy and his child are definitely between her and the vehicle. And to a layman, if you were looking at that photograph or looking at the video, you would think they were all part of the same family, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Well, I would anyway. Well, I don't. I think the guy and the child were obviously interviewed, but you know, why not her, sort of thing? I don't.
Yeah,
it's all a bit strange. It's all a little bit strange.
Yeah, the other thing as well, that both her and Zapruder were kind of in isolation. There was a distance between them and anybody else there. Well, Zapruder had his secretary with him. So if there had been...
Yeah, but his wife was pleased about it.
If there were any noises or smells coming for any reason from those people, you know, I mean, maybe with the distance between them and anybody else, nobody would notice them. So, of course, one of the most famous photos is, I think, made more famous by the Stone movie, is I think you said to me 4 hobos. I think it's 3, isn't it? The 3 tramps.
Yeah. Wasn't there a 4th as well though?
All right. Well, I mean, but not in the famous photo, no?
No, not in the photo. There's 3 in the photo. But I thought there was another one that was picked up by the underpass, which may have been the guy in the shadow.
Right. So, yeah, what I wanted to ask you about that was because those guys were picked up in the railway car, weren't they?
Hmm.
So, and what I wanted to know, I think I looked into it previously, but I can't remember what I found, because we were talking about the train that was going over the overpass. Could that car have been from that train that was going over the overpass, or would it have been a different train? Do you know that one?
What, the car they were found in?
Yeah.
No, they were found in a stationary car.
But so it wasn't from that train that came over and then just stopped. So that train that was going over
I don't think so. I can't be 100% sure.
Or
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure, but I don't think so.
could it
Car in a siding.
could it have been possible for them to have jumped off the moving train and then to jumped into the parked train?
I would have thought so, yeah.
And the other thing I thought about, because I think it was police officer Harkness, I think, that officially picked them up. And but I don't know. I mean, there are two police officers in the picture with the Tramps. And again, it's it's speculating. I'm just talking about the possibility, but those police officers had rifles, or one of them had rifles. So would it have been, what do you think about the possibility that actually one or, I don't know, was it one or two rifles that the police officers were holding actually had been in the possession of the three Tramps?
Yeah, it makes you wonder, doesn't it?
And also with those pictures, the police uniforms. So some people have said, I'm not saying it's true, but some people have said that they're actually Ku Klux Klan logos on their sleeves or something. I don't know whether that's true. I don't know a lot about the Ku Klux Klan.
Well, that been uncommon in 1963 anyway, because a lot of police were in the Ku Klux Klan at that time, in any case, so that wouldn't have been uncommon.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard
just
that.
adds to the motive pile, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I need to go, mate.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we come back. I mean, we finished on the photographic, so we could pick up, maybe talk a little bit more about the Tramps next time. Okay.
Yeah.
So, maybe a little bit more photographic evidence, and then we can talk about the oral testimonies as well, the witness account.
Yeah, I'm gonna dig out some stuff, and I'm gonna film for you as well. A part of the documentary that I saw the other night. I don't think you will have seen the footage, but I'm gonna film it and send it to you anyway.
Which film is that?
It's another JFK documentary.
Okay. Yeah, so it's interesting to hear some of the things you said. I mean, because some of the stuff I haven't heard, and maybe like some of the stuff I said as well, maybe stuff you hadn't heard, I don't think you've heard before either. So of course, not every.
Yeah, definitely is.
Yeah. Okay, we're finished there then, Jason. We'll pick up where we left off from sometime in the near future. Okay. Okay. Cheers.
All right, mate.
Yeah. Cheers.